we'll go ahead and get started. This is responsive images in Drupal. If you want to follow along yourself, the slides are on GitHub. There's a link to the repo on the session page, or on the session page, so you can clone that down and follow along if you want to. There's also going to be a feedback at the site that was it linked me or that site. There'll be a link in the slides at the very end to provide feedback, which is always great because I hope to give this session more, so that'd be great. My name is James Nettik. I am jnettik on Twitter, Instagram, most of the internet. If you want to follow me there, you can. I'm a front-end developer at Atten Design Group. We're a Drupal agency in Denver, and we work with a lot of nonprofits and cause-driven organizations. We have a booth. If you're interested in talking to us, feel free to swing by. We also have a lot of booklets to give away, which could hinder my ability to get through an airport again, so come take books, please. So before we get started really getting into the how to implement responsive images, I want to talk for just a second about why. Images have kind of been a big problem on the builds that we do for a while. They've kind of been understated prior to responsive design. But it doesn't mean the problems weren't there. We were just able to more easily ignore them. But now, because we have to account for large screens, small screens, high resolutions, low resolutions, and all of the sizes and resolutions in between, it's really put those challenges to the forefront of what we're trying to do. Before, we were always kind of forced to optimize images for one context, which usually came at the expense of all of the other ones. And so now we're starting to have the ability to be more considerate of everything when we're building. One of the biggest reasons, or one of the biggest hurts, at least in my opinion, is performance. Everyone knows that performance is important, but oftentimes throughout the build it kind of gets shoved into the back of our minds, or the back of what we're doing. But I mean, honestly, Google in 2010 started to factor performance into their search engine results. How much it influences things, it's not really known, but we do know that they are accounting for it. Part of the reasons they're citing for it is that users spend more time on sites that perform better, as well as it also, now that we're dealing with tiered or metered data, and people are getting charged for every byte that they're downloading, we're charging them less for sites that perform better on mobile networks, especially in developing nations. Performance is such a big deal to Google that recently they've been experimenting with a slow label. It's not fully implemented, and they haven't officially confirmed this. These are just screenshots people have seen. But the idea is there. Not only are they trying to now reward sites that are better performing, but they're maybe exploring the idea of penalizing sites that are poor performing. So that's kind of huge. Apart from just search engine results, Google's found in studies that users are less likely to revisit a site that they've found a poor or slow experience. So even if you go back and fix your performance issues after the fact, the damage may have already been done for at least some duration of time. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, which also aligns with this idea that we've all seen varying variations of this statistic. 85% of people want the site to load faster, or just as fast, if not faster, on mobile. I kind of take that number, honestly, with a grain of salt, just because I've seen so many different fluctuations of it. But the precedence that kind of illustrates is kind of really weighs on me, that this is something that is, I'm getting a flag to speak louder, sorry. That this is something that we really kind of need to take seriously. And when you think about, at least the last time I saw this stat, that 64% of all page loads are images, that's one huge place that we have to start optimizing our sites. So you take all of this issue, or all of this idea that images could be a huge optimization piece, and all of this data that performance is really important, and then we consider this. that in the last couple of years, there's been a huge design shift and focus on extremely large, very high resolution images, and for good reason. They're impactful, you know, they make a statement and they're really nice to look at. But with everything kind of keeping in the back of our mind, we need to implement these design patterns responsibly. So image optimization and how we serve them up to our users is no longer the thing we'll handle later after the MVP has been shipped. One of the next issues that we need to kind of think about is art direction. And for me, that means two things. Well, for me, that means us trying to regain some control that we lose in this very fragmented, abstracted medium that we're kind of finding ourselves in now. One of the first areas that we don't really have control over is what our clients upload into their websites. You know, we're all working in CMSs, we're all working in Drupal, and so that means our clients have control over the content. Largely, clients have control over their images. So they can upload however big of images, or what is more likely the case, however small of images they want into those large banner hero images. We may want to be doing a landscape display, and they're going to upload a portrait image, right? And so a lot of times it feels like we're trying to put a square, you know, round peg into a square hole or something like that, where there's just this disconnect between what we're trying to achieve and what they're trying to provide. The other area we don't really have control is context. I love this image just because it represents the fragmentation just across Android devices, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in iOS as well. But now we're trying to take these images that we don't have control over and force them into, or put them into contexts that we also don't have control over. As designers and developers, we're going to want to control how all of this information is displayed, and our clients are going to want to have control over the information itself. Largely, in like the case of an image, you know, the client's not going to want the CEO's head to get cut off on the staff page, right? So if the system is automating the cropping, we need to make sure that doesn't happen. Clients are going to need that control, and more importantly, that control needs to be easy for them to use. The last problem we're trying to solve, and that what Responsive Images handles really well, is file type support. I'm not going to go too much into this presentation. Just kind of, you know, let's be aware that this is becoming more and more possible now. Adding new file types for images has been really hard. If we're serving up one single source, there is no option for fallback there. So if the browser you're looking at a site on doesn't support this new image format, you're probably not going to use it because you don't want those images to be broken. So we end up in this stalemate where developers are kind of resistant to using new file formats because there's not really a way to provide a fallback or provide an alternate, and browser vendors are kind of resistant to implementing them into their browsers because no one's using them. That's why it took almost 10 years for PNGs to just start getting supported. And right now we have three, at least that I know of, three major new file types that we can be playing with that offer us better compression, better rendering across all resolutions. JPEG XR, WebP, and then of course SVG. SVG is actually, you know, really decently supported actually. If you have to support IE8, you need to come up with a fallback. I think IE9 Plus and all modern browsers are now supporting it. JPEG XR and WebP are a little bit more fragmented. I think, and I could be wrong with this, but I think JPEG XR supported only in Safari, and WebP, I think you have WebKit browsers, so Chrome, and I guess Safari as well. But the first two offer a lot better compression, which means the images are going to perform better and load better, which kind of brings us back to that first point. SVG, you're not really having to worry about a raster image. Since it's vector, it's going to work across all resolutions. It's really great for logos. But if nothing's using it, how do we deal with that? Well, we can now do something like this in the source where, just like anyone who's familiar with, say, the video element, you provide different sources, say this is a WebP image. Do you support it? Great, use it. If you don't, use the next one in line. Use the next one, and then here's the final fallback, which is usually maybe a JPEG or a PNG. So what this allows us to do is not only experiment with new technologies, but it allows us to optimize experiences for users who are in more compliant browsers while not alienating ones who are in older browsers. So this is something that's kind of huge, especially in the front-end world. But as with everything, with all of these new abilities, all of these new contexts, and everything we're trying to account for now, we have new complications as well. And the big one is, the big two, I guess, is syntax as well as just sheer number of files. Before, we were dealing with one line of code and one image source. Now, we're dealing with this. I haven't counted that, but that looks like a lot of lines of code. This chunk of code, and this is obviously an extreme, this is not going to be every time you're trying to do responsive images. This is throwing everything in the kitchen sink at this. But if we wanted to account for 3 different resolutions, 2 new file formats, at 2 different image crops, we're up to now 12 different image sources. So that's a lot of markup to write, that's a lot of files to manage, and so that's a kind of a big deterrent, kind of an intimidating thing to think about. Thankfully, we have Drupal. Oh, my GIF is cut off at the end. It's supposed to say, "I will try to fix you." Oh, that's sad.
It's not fixed.
Well, we're going to call this early then. I'm out. Drupal makes a lot of this really easy for us, and even outside of Drupal, you have a lot of image optimization tools. But Drupal makes this nice because it plugs into the system we're already using. You can do image styles, so manage every image, every crop, everything that we're doing. You store that in Drupal, and it's now structured for us. Drupal now has the Breakpoints module, which is it is in Drupal 8 and backported to Drupal 7. And what the Breakpoints module does is it allows Drupal to now be aware of all of the design elements that we are currently dealing with, all the different breakpoints, the layout changes we might be having. And then we have the picture module, which acts as kind of the go-between. So picture module maps image styles to breakpoints, to specific breakpoints. It provides theme functions to render all of that markup for us. And then it also includes the JavaScript polyfill. Because this is a newer technology, we kind of need to provide or tell older browsers how to use it. So it provides the JavaScript fallback for us. And then the last thing we're going to look at is the manual crop module, which gives the users the control to actually distinguish the crops and the focal points of the images that they're uploading, so giving them the control back that they want as well. So with all of that said, it is now demo time. And now I'm going to see if I can find my cursor and how do I get out of here. Nope, not that one. Exit. There we go. Give me just 1 second. This was all set up and then I had to restart. This is going to be great on a... Okay. Awesome. Okay. So, this is a dummy site, and in it we have this test post. In this image, or in this post, we have a blog post with a banner header image like we might see in a lot of designs, as well as who the author is and, say, a headshot that they would want to represent them. Right now, if we were to resize this, what's going to happen is the layout's changing, but we're not actually serving up any optimized images. So in this case, we're still serving up a 960 pixel image in this space, and forcing users on mobile devices to download them. Once you get down to here, though this image is still plain small, it's only 200 pixels big, it's a square, so it's really tall and kind of looks awkward in this layout. Looks fine here, but not there. So what we want to do is change that. And so the first thing we need to do is set up our image styles to work with that. I've already done that, in which case you can see we have 3 crops for the hero image, these 3 here. We have large, medium, and small. And just to make the numbers easy to work with, it's 960, 640, and 320. Those are the 3 different sizes we're working with there, which kind of correlates to mobile, tablet, and desktop. And then for the headshot, we only really want 2. We want that perfect square for desktop when the layout supports that, and that's this headshot inset, and then headshot full, which goes the full width on smaller devices. And so with those, now that we have those set up, what we want to then do is make Drupal now aware of all of our different breakpoints. So we go back, with the Breakpoints module enabled, you'll have this Breakpoints page, and we'll go ahead and create our first 3 breakpoints. It usually provides this empty source set. To be honest, I've never actually used it in a project just because I find it kind of awkward in the naming conventions I usually set up. So the first one I want to set up is our large breakpoint. And in here, you just provide a normal media query style breakpoint. So we'll go min width. This one we will say 640. So this kind of covers the range of from what could be tablet up to the site caps at 960. So that's kind of that larger screen range. If we wanted to provide a multiplier, so say we want to account for normal screens as well as 2x, we could check that, and then we get another option that we'll see here in a little bit. I'm just going to keep things simple for now and just say standard resolution for all. We created our large one, save. We'll create a medium. Save. And then this last one's a little bit awkward. What I usually provide is a small breakpoint. So and I just set it at 0 pixels. This is the absolute smallest. Anything's going to be bigger than this, so this is kind of our catch-all if we ever need it. But I make sure that that one's in place as well. So now we have the 3 breakpoints that we're going to be used for both of these sets of images. The next thing you create is something called a breakpoint group. What this allows us to do is create, essentially that. It allows us to pick specific breakpoints to work within specific components. So we'll add a new one, and we'll create one for our hero image. We'll just name it hero. And I want to include for this one all 3 breakpoints, large, medium, and small. And then we go ahead and save. This part's really important. We need to make sure that the order of these is correct. And the correct order for these is actually biggest to smallest. The reason is that the picture element's going to use the first one that it accepts. So in this case, is our device bigger than 640? Okay, use that one. Is it bigger than 320? Okay, use that one. Okay, it's a mobile device, we'll use the last one. If these were reversed, what would happen is it'll say, is this image bigger than 0 pixels? And if you're on a desktop screen, it's going to be, so it'll use your tiny low resolution image and then try to fill the space allotted. So you want to make sure that the stack is set up properly with these. We'll go ahead and save. And then we're going to create one more for our headshot. In this case, we only really have one breakpoint that we want to, 1 to 2 breakpoints that we're going to want to work with. We want to use the full image for smaller devices, and then we're going to switch to the square for larger ones. So all I need for this is large and small. I don't need the medium ones. I could add maybe some performance, some scaling one. For simplicity, we're just going to use these 2. But it also showcases that breakpoints are kind of this separate concept outside of then the groups that we organize them into. And then with this, same thing, reorganize and save. So now Drupal is aware of our breakpoints, and it's aware of how the different components on our site need to use them. So the next thing we do is we use the picture module, which when that's enabled, you have this picture mappings page. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to add a new one, and we're going to map picture elements to breakpoint groups. So go ahead and add. It asks which breakpoint group we want to use. We'll start with our hero, and we'll hit continue. Provided a title. I believe I picked hero first. Yeah. Okay, so now for every combination of breakpoints, if we were to do 1 and 2x, we would have, in this section, we have large, min width 640, and it would have one option for standard, one option for high resolutions. But since we didn't do that, we're only presented with these 3. And this is for each of our different breakpoints. And we have one of 3 options. Don't use this breakpoint. I'm not sure of a context in which that would apply. You're usually going to use one of these 2. In this case, we're going to map them all to specific image styles. So for the large breakpoint, we want to use the large hero image style. For the medium, we want to use the hero media or hero medium, and then for the small, we want to use hero small. Finish, and then we'll do this one more time, and we'll set up the headshots. In this case, since we only pulled 2 of our breakpoints into this, we're only presented with 2 options. So again, it's that direct correlation between these specific contexts are using these specific image styles. Large, I want the inset. And then here I want full. We'll go ahead and finish. So now we've created our breakpoints, and the picture module is now aware of them. Everything is organized. All we need to now do is apply them to our image fields. So go to our content types. Structure, content types. And we have 2. We have the blog post, which is the container, and then the author, which is a node type, and they're connected with an entity reference. So we'll first manage the display for the blog post, pull content, and then for the hero field, we want to change this to use the picture element. And this is what's going to render all of that markup that we saw in one of the previous slides. In this, we want to use the hero mapping. Fallback image, we want to use the hero large. This depends on kind of how you think about design and how you think about fallbacks. This is mostly for browsers that don't support media queries, not necessarily browsers that don't support picture element. So what's going to happen is if you don't recognize media queries, how are you handling your site? My thought is I usually have conditional classes, so if I have to support IE8 and they don't support media queries, I will serve you just a fixed width desktop kind of rendering, because that's probably the context you're going to need. So in this case, I'll pick the largest image because that's what you'll need. If I was going the opposite way and say, you know what, if you don't support media queries, you get the mobile layout, I'd pick the smallest one. So it's kind of which fallback do you want to provide. The context is a little bit different. We'll go ahead and say update, and then save, and then we'll do that same thing with the author. We'll say use the picture element. Use the headshots, and in this case we want to provide the inset one because of the full width. That's the layout we're going to see. Update and save. So now with all of these in place, with all these accounted for, if we go to our content list, click on test post, we don't see anything different, which is a good thing. And then we'll resize. This one's going to be hard to see because in this case, all we're seeing is a scaled down version of the image, so you're not actually going to notice anything change. Ideally, if you're on a slower internet connection, you may see a little flicker as like the old image goes away, the new one is loaded. But in this case, in the John Doe, as we get down, you see we went from the normal square that we have down to a rectangle that's a little bit more optimal for viewing for this layout. If we were to look at the network real quick, we'll reload this. We see what's been loaded. These are our hero photo and our author photo. And these are the only ones that have been loaded. And then as we start expanding out, layout switches, and you can see since we hit that breakpoint, 2 new images have been loaded. So it's not loading all of the images ahead of time, it's only loading them as we need them. It's loading the proper ones for the proper context. So it's not quite lazy loading, but it's a lazy way of thinking about lazy loading, which is kind of awesome. But we have one more problem still to address. We'll bring this back. John Doe's head is cut off, right? So we don't have control over the image that they're going to upload. We don't have any control of the image they're going to provide. And we want to make sure that this doesn't happen. There's a number of different modules Drupal has for this. Like I said, my preference, solely based on the user experience of it, is one called manual crop. So we'll go ahead and set that up now.
What's it called?
Manual crop. Yeah, and if I'm sorry, I have this, so it's kind of loud up here for me. So if you can't hear me, yell at me. So to set up manual crop, again, enable a module. I wouldn't recommend using the recommended release. Use the development release, just because there's better documentation. It relies on a couple third-party JavaScript libraries, and so you need to get the specific instructions. All of that is in the modules README, and there's links and everything you'd need to get all of those. So the documentation for the development version is a lot better. So I'd recommend that one. Once that's set up and enabled, go to configuration, go back to our image styles, and we'll check out the headshot inset. And this is, even though, you know, I was fortunate, I uploaded a square image, maybe they're not going to, so we'll give them a little bit of control over this one. With that module enabled, you get 4 new effects, and the one we're going to use is custom crop. Go ahead and click add. Here we're going to provide the dimensions for the image, or the base, at least ratio. So in this case, we're just doing a 200 by 200 pixel square. We say we want to maintain proportions. So that's kind of using that as the base, and then they can resize that as they need to. I don't personally use the fallback. The idea behind it is that, let's say you make cropping not a required step, they can just upload the image and click save. If they don't provide their own direction, which image style should we use? The reason I don't use this one is because once we add this, we already have our scale and crop in place. So regardless of anything, it's always going to get scaled down. Organizationally, this makes it a little bit, it's not like I'm following a trail of breadcrumbs. Everything's kind of in the one place for me. There may be a performance concern, maybe someone more back-end minded could, if this is horrible, then let me know. I haven't noticed anything too bad with performance on the sites I build it with, so that's kind of why I do things this way. If they don't provide a crop, it'll scale and crop automatically for you. So we'll update this. And one thing to note, it will always put the manual crop effects at the top of your list, even if you rearrange it and then click save. It adds it back to the top, and this is by design. Manual crop needs to kind of override everything else and then apply other layers onto that. So the next thing, we'll add it to the headshot full. What do we make? 640 by 320. All right. 320. Maintain proportions. No fallback. Add effect. All right. So now the image styles that power our headshots have been set up to allow users to manually crop them. Now all we need to do is tell the Drupal image field widget that this is the interface that the user needs. So go back to content types. We'll go to author. We'll set up, we'll go to the edit for the headshot field. And then as we scroll down, we have this manual crop field set. If we expand that, there's a lot of different checkboxes. Honestly, the only one I'm ever really using is enable. I leave a lot of these at the default. I've never really had much of a use case for modifying them. If you do, you can definitely play around with a lot of things like inline cropping and shortcut keys and things like that. Next, it asks us, okay, so are we wanting to include all of these image styles or exclude them? It's a very Drupal blocks API kind of way of thinking about inclusion. But essentially, this is a list of every image style that has manual crop assigned to it, in which case we only have 2. In our case, we do want both of them, so we'll check them. But because I'm providing that fallback out of the box, I'm not going to require them. You might have a use case where every image a client uploads into their site, you want them to actually provide some direction on how it needs to be rendered or how it needs to be displayed. So requiring it may be something necessary. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and click Save. And then if we go back to our post, we'll go ahead and click Edit. And then we'll edit the author node that's associated with this. We now have this field set, or this select list of the 2 different crops that we've provided. Naming, in this case, the way you name your image styles is really helpful, especially for clients, so they know maybe what they're actually cropping for, what context it could be used with. Because one of the biggest challenges with responsive design is now clients don't have a full context as to what the changes they're making might affect. So labeling things clearly is really important. Also, if we only had one context that we were providing a crop for, this would be a button instead of a drop-down. So go ahead and pick full. And now, with this enabled, we get this drag and drop interface. We can scale it down if we wanted to, if the image size allowed us to. You get this little preview over here, and then a lot of different options. Once you are happy with the crop, go ahead and click Save. And just for, once it's been cropped, you notice that in the label, if you can see that, it does say that this one has now been cropped. There's already something in the system for this. We'll go ahead and do Inset, and we'll do the same thing. Let's say for this we don't want the full square. We only want to focus on him swinging the cricket bat as he was meant to. All right, so those have been set. We'll save that, and we'll save our node. And caching, so we'll refresh. So we already see that this is taking effect onto the inset one. We now have that crop that we defined. And then as we start scaling down, layout changes, refresh the page, and we already have the crop that we defined for this section. So everything's in place, everything is looking, clients have control that they need to make sure their image is rendered as good as possible. Designers and developers have the control they need to make sure that visually they look good across all the breakpoints, and we're handling things in a lot more performant way. So that ends the demo. Like I said, it was kind of short, sweet, to the point. There's a lot we can do with this. That's, like I said, that's just scratching the surface. If you are interested in a lot more further learning about this, there's a great article on responsive images and their effect on a list apart. Not only does he throw everything you can at it, he also provides performance benchmarks across all of the different contexts and devices. So you actually get to see the performance gains that setting a site up this way will give you. Just last week, actually, Jason Grigsby, who was one of the guys who helped write the spec, he had an interview on the Web Ahead. It's a bit long, but it definitely helps give you some mindset as to when to use the picture element, when to maybe only use the source set attribute, which we didn't really talk about too much, but when to use which option, when to use them both. It kind of gives you a better idea as to the technical mindset and understanding as to what we're implementing. And then for more of a text-based references to the demo that we went through, I wrote about them on the Atom website, so the responsive images in Drupal, part 1 and part 2, shameless plug. So if you're definitely interested more in this and want to dive in more, check out those resources. I'd recommend them all. Obligatory reminder, the sprints are Sunday at the Nerdery. The schedule's online, #MidCamp. And then feedback, questions and feedback. So if you want to go to the joind.in, my session's there. Like I said, please provide feedback. If I did something you didn't like, if I did something great, tell me to keep it up. That would help me. Like I said, I want to give this session more and make it better as I give it. You can always reach out to me on Twitter or any of the other social sites. I'm always jnettik there. And yeah, I'll take any questions if anybody has them.
and I wouldn't design a site this way, but I inherit a lot of sites where the image is not a dedicated field, it's blocked into the body field.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any of those tools or techniques that you could use in that case?
Yeah, so this was actually a conversation I had the other day. Images, especially as they're growing more complex, I'm starting to think of them less as just that one file and more of their own self-contained content structure. So I'm more and more wanting to get away from tools like IMCE, where you just throw in an image tag, in favor of something like the media module or Scald. And just because that treats images as it should be treated, its own standalone chunk. And then with what a lot of those modules provide is a way to take that structured content, and this is, by the way, this is the way Drupal 8, as far as my understanding is going to be handling images. It just embeds a placeholder into the body field, and then when that content's rendered, it passes all of those IDs through the theme functions you need them to. You can pre-process them, you can take whatever control you want over them. So the unfortunate thing is that's definitely more work in the upfront. If you have maybe an install profile, it can do that out of the box. Short answer is it's trying to get away from the way we've traditionally thought about images in Drupal. In the back.
So this is kind of a technical question, but how does something like this work with Varnish? Because we tried to do something like this with Varnish, and Varnish basically said no. Whoever looked at it before you, that's what everyone in the future is getting.
That's a very good question, and I don't know that I have an answer for that, actually. Yeah, I haven't encountered that yet with these, so yeah, I don't know. That'll be something I'll be interested to read up on, though. So thank you.
Any reason to use manage crop instead of the other options that are there for cropping images using JavaScript or jQuery?
Sorry, say that again?
Any reason to use specifically manage crop module instead of using any of the other options?
I see. So why using manual crop specifically in favor of, I don't know the names, there's one that, so there's other modules in Drupal, one that allows Drupal to try and pick the most interesting focal point. There's another one where you just kind of pick a point and say, this is important, and do your thing. What I like about manual crop in favor of those other ones is that it's a lot more granular. You actually see in the interface what your image is going to be. So it's a lot more intuitive for clients who kind of need that visual feedback. And I've just had, it's a lot more stable than some of the other ones I've used in the past. So client interface and stability, at least in my experience with other solutions. I thought I saw one over here.
It was just a question related to how does something like this affect your initial choice of the image, size, or type?
Can you explain? I guess I'm not quite.
Well, in other words, when you go out, let's say you had a choice of certain what's it called, density of images, or certain sizing of images. Would this affect at all how you would choose that in the first place, what you're going to use?
Like the actual image itself?
The actual image itself. Would it have any implications?
It would. And so the recommendation that I would always want to give to clients, because again, we're oftentimes, much as we want to be, we're not the ones providing these. For the microphone, the question was, how does something like this affect the selection of the images you put into the site? And so, one, it's initially going through a content inventory, understanding what your client can reasonably provide. Don't design something with, massive images when you've, been able to see that the client will never be able to provide them. Unless you have an agreement where they're going to come to you, which, okay, that's great. But if not, the idea is that they're going to be able to take over these sites. The second thing is, if they can provide those appropriately sized images, tell the client to upload as big of images as they have. Understanding what you're going to be supporting. So, the site's only ever going to be 960. We want to support 2x devices, so maybe a minimum you put, was that 1920? understanding what you're going to be supporting and recommending that to the client. But I always just kind of say upload as big of an image as you can get. The site will then take care of sizing it and doing everything that it needs to do. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. What you're saying, I guess, is it might be more important to get an inventory of what the client actually has.
Yes.
Now you have more flexibility with this to work with.
Right, yeah.
Before, with less flexibility, it was less relevant what they had.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and outside of images, just content in general either before or at least during development and design, getting an idea as to what the client is actually going to be putting into the site is always a great idea. Any other questions? No? Awesome. Well, thank you.